Hey everyone, welcome to this edition of the Masterclass. We are exponential individuals. My name is Eric Patel, and with us today to walk us through this Masterclass is Dr. Howard Rankin. Dr. Rankin has extensive expertise and knowledge in the areas of psychology, neuroscience, and behavior change. Dr. Rankin has written 12 books in his own name, co-written another 12, including the Exponential Individual Playbook, and ghostwritten 30 others, all nonfiction. Howard has also published more than 30 scientific articles on addiction and behavior change, has been a consultant to the NIH and WHO, as well as editor of a major psychological journal. Howard is also a Psychology Today blogger, the creator and host of How Not to Think podcast, which if you checked it out, please do, and science director at predictive analytics company Intuitly AI. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Howard, who will walk us through today's masterclass. Howard.
Thank you so much, Eric, and it's great to be part of the ExI team. All of you who are part of that, welcome. And what I'm going to share with you today is something that I have found. I will give you the roots of these that have occurred over the course of my career, but just in the recent past, been able to put this together to really show us, I think, the power that we actually have within us that very often is simply not recognized or activated. And that's certainly relevant for being exponential. So I call this the miracle within you. And here we go. So the relationship between mind and body has been one that has obviously occupied philosophers and all sorts of people for centuries. But one of the things that occurs to me is while you can distinguish even the brain from the body in some ways, the recent research shows that is a bit misleading. That in fact, the mind and body are one. And I'll explain how we've come to that. And to some extent, dividing the mind and the body is a false distinction. The body contributes to the mind contributes to the body. Those concepts interrelate and very easily get confused. And as a result, human beings tend to overrate consciousness. We're conscious of relatively few things that are going on, and certainly relatively few things that are going on under our skin and in our bodies and in our mind body. We're not really aware of that, only what it presents to consciousness. And there is a massive amount going on. 11 million bits of information at least per second processed by your body all the time. Now, obviously, we couldn't have consciousness of all of that. We wouldn't have time or space for anything else. So most of this, we are totally unaware. So we have to be careful about this making a false distinction. I'll get to that more later. We have to be careful about overrating consciousness and also thinking. This is one of the things that has come up in the recent AI debates about, oh, it's all about logic and thinking, and that's all that matters. Actually, that's not true. In fact, in the 1960s, a philosopher called Hubert Dreyfus wrote a paper called Why Computers Need Bodies in Order to Be Intelligent. An interesting thought and topic at the intersection of human intelligence and AI. So the body, and I'll mention her later, Candace Pert, she was one of the first to say in recent scientific times, the body is the subconscious. The body is the subconscious. Now, let me give you a little backstory here in terms of my experiences in history that got me into this particular topic. I started my career and then continued it quite a lot in the addictions field. Now, an addiction, when we think of addiction, we think of, anything from alcohol to gambling to porn to, you name it. But addiction could be anything. Addiction actually is a very, very well-rehearsed habit, behavior. And changing addiction and changing any habit is not about thinking about it. It's about doing things differently. Thinking and being aware is necessary, but it is nowhere sufficient to change a behavior. And when people do transform out of addiction, it's not just their behavior that's changed. And for every habit, whether we're talking about a superb professional sports skill or an addiction to alcohol or drugs, there is a physical structure in the brain to every habit. There is a structure that has to be deconstructed before you can get out of that habit and begin new ones. Now, this is very, very important because it's to some extent a myth. I recently wrote about this in Psychology Today. It's a myth that, oh, okay, I need to change my behavior, I'll stop and I'll make that decision, I'll change. You can't do that. That is not possible if you are indeed addicted to something, because you have a physical structure in your brain that needs to be deconstructed. And the way it's deconstructed is by acting differently in those challenging, tempting situations. And when I was on the addiction research unit at the University of London, way back when, my colleague and I, Professor Ray Hodgson, we had devised an experiment, which actually was part of my PhD, which was to expose alcoholics to some alcohol with the purpose trying to get them to resist it. Can they change their habit in that situation? And interestingly enough, we put out a letter to a variety of people who were in the addiction alcohol program, asked for feedback. And one day, I remember this one Friday evening, this guy came in, very well dressed, the archetype London exec, carrying his suit briefcase. He came in, we chatted for a while. He said, "So you guys think you can change addiction, do you?" Said, "No." He opened out his briefcase, pulled out half a bottle of vodka, drank it back in front of us, said, "Treat that." And what's interesting is that people who have addictions, I think, very often are cynical and skeptical about people who say, "Oh, yeah, you can quit it. It's easy." It is not easy. It's not. So that was one first introduction to this concept in my career. The second one is multiple personality disorder, and this is an important one. I have treated a number of people with dissociative disorder in my career, but I had one particular client who had a horrendous background of abuse. And it turned out she had several alter egos. And what I found there, which was very interesting, was that each alter ego had a very specific physical characteristic. So, for example, one of them always came with a migraine. Always came with a migraine. And one time this lady came in to my office and said, "Oh, I've got a horrendous migraine. Nothing's getting rid of it." And so I knew what was going on. We did a little hypnosis, talked to the alter ego, told it to go back into its safe place, get out of the way. 15 minutes later, lady comes out of her hypnosis and says, "Oh my God, what did you do? The migraine's gone. It's completely gone." Really interesting that those specific alter egos had very specific physical characteristics. And I'll tell you why that's more important in a short while. Now, is this fragmentation? Because it's not so much multiple, it's the fragmentation of personality. Alter egos are designed to keep very traumatic secrets out of consciousness. Is this sort of fractionation, is that only common in dissociation and with trauma, or is it more common? Perhaps we have different sides to ourselves. Perhaps there are times when we're grumpy, times when we're happy, different times. Do they have some sort of physical structure that's a little different than normal? And so that brings up my notion of programmed persona theory, which is that the different sides of us, the different sides to us, actually are multicellular coding within the mind body. That those cells are signifying and signaling information, which is likely to affect your energy level, your mood, your thoughts, everything about you. And if that's true, how do we change it? How do we change that? Because this really gets, I think, to the heart of change. If we assume, and it's certainly an assumption at this point, with some evidence, but if we assume these different sides to us, the different coding of all these cells in our body that are communicating, then theoretically, there are things we can do to decode that. And I'll get to that. Sure. Now, Candace Pert in the late 90s wrote a book, I think a tremendous book. If you haven't read it, certainly recommend it, called Molecules of Emotion. And what she pointed out was that many cells in our body create and feel feelings, emotion through peptides, peptide release and uptake. That emotion and feeling runs through our entire system. It's not just up in your head. It's not just in your consciousness. And she was certainly one of the first of more recent scientists that I know who stated her opinion that the body is actually the subconscious. That what is going on inside your body, this amazing cellular communication that we'll get to in a minute, is actually your subconscious. Now, that's kind of a mind-blowing concept, especially if you've been trained and thought that the brain is everything and everything else is just to move your muscles around and all of that. It's way more complicated than that. And that brings us to another discovery that I made fairly recently, a couple of years ago, when I invited John Lieff onto my How Not to Think podcast. John Lieff is the author of an amazing book called The Secret Language of Cells. And in that book, he summarizes all the latest research in cellular communication, and it is mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. Unless you're in this field, deep in it, you will be stunned. And even if you are deep into it, you'll be stunned. What he shows is the cells in our body, the trillions of cells, communicate in an incredibly complex way. Some of it, this is mind-blowing, wireless signaling. Now think about that for a moment. You know, I don't think many of us, when we think about neural networks, think of wireless signaling. We think of, oh, well, they're chains communicating with each other, you know, through neurotransmitters and all of that stuff. Um, and so therefore, the more connections you have, the stronger that pathway is. For example, the heart is considered to have like 40,000 direct connections with the brain. But suppose those cells are also capable of wireless signaling. Then you have a lot more than 40,000, a lot more. In addition, John Lieff points out that some of the communication really is not deterministic, but quantum in nature, which means that the information could be pushed anywhere, at any time, to any point. Just incredible, incredible. And just to give you one example, your body decides, oh, we need more T cells. You know, I just trod on something and I cut my foot. So it sends information to the bone marrow to create more T cells. However, the T cells are then sent to the thymus gland, where a nurse gland tests them for efficiency. Specifically, two things. One, can they recognize toxins and infections? And two, more importantly, is their response appropriate? Because obviously you don't want an over-exaggerated response, because that's going to end up killing good cells. So these T cells are created, sent, as I like to think of it, to ranger school, and most of them fail and are discarded. Now, the other T cells that survive are sent to the area that is a problem. But it just gets more complicated than that. These cells are given incredible directions about the quickest way of moving to that point of injury. They're given specific directions. Like, it's a bit like, you know, GPS. Don't go down I-95 or whatever because there's a traffic jam. Go this way. That's just the beginning of the complexity of these cells and how they operate. And for me, that is a game changer and underpins a lot of what I'm talking about here, because we underestimate seriously what is going on under the surface of our bodies. So I make no apology for promoting John Leaf's book. Read this book. The subtitle is a good one. What biological conversations tell us about the brain-body connection, the future of medicine, and life itself. Because this doesn't just apply to human bodies or animal bodies. Potentially, it applies to every living thing. And Ray Kurzweil writes an amazing review, which ends with a must-read for anyone seeking to understand modern biology and advanced medical science. Great book. Obviously, it's a little technical, but he's done as much as he can to make it as understandable to someone who doesn't have any background in this biology or microorganisms. Now, as well as all of this background in terms of my psychological work, I've also known various people, mostly met through the course of helping them write their books, who seem to be good examples of possibilities based on this notion. A woman called Barbara Morello reached out to me. She was writing a book. She caught the H1N1 virus in 2009, and her heart was in terrible shape, and she needed a heart transplant. She went to the hospital, was put in a coma for 2 weeks. When she came out of the coma, she sort of remembered what we might think of as dreams that she had over the past 2 weeks. And a lot of them seemed to be related to what actually was happening to her. So, for example, in the early stages of the coma, they were having to cardiovert her to keep her alive. And her dream was driving down the highway, desperately looking for electricity. And so she said, well, these are interesting dreams. And listening to them, I felt something more was actually happening. I felt that in this coma, removed from everyday life and consciousness, she'd actually resolved some big issues in her life. She had a very authoritarian dad. She was very concerned about her physical appearance. One of the dreams, for example, was she gets sent a video which says, if you watch this video, you'll be the most beautiful woman in the world, but you'll die within 24 hours. And she watches the video, and the next thing she sees, she's dead in a dumpster, is a dream. And then the next dream is Satan comes to her and says, oh, you're a mess. You'll be no good for anyone. Follow me. I'll take care of you. She almost does the deal, but she doesn't. And the next dream is an angelic figure who tells her that you'll see through different eyes and your heart will be healed. So she wakes up about a week later. Cardiologist comes to see her, says, oh, we got to get you tested right away, Does the cardio imaging. He comes back to her and says, literally, I cannot explain this. You have a heart of a 20-year-old. It is totally healed. It's a heart that we would give as a transplant. I don't know what happened. Wow. Now, she did see through different eyes because she'd had a bit of a stroke and her vision was impaired. How did that happen? Medically, can you explain how that happened? No, you can't. But one possibility is that whatever happened stimulated within her body, throughout her body, some reaction that changed her heart, that healed it. And her book is a remarkable story. It's called In God's Waiting Room. The only way to avoid death was to face her life in a coma. Happy to say we did win a bronze medal in an ebook award, and it's a compelling book. Now here's somebody else I know. Dr. Monika is a psychologist in New Mexico. And a few years ago, her husband, early 50s, had a horrible stroke. Terrible stroke. Again, his prognosis was awful. Yeah, he's probably going to be a wheelchair, vegetative, not be able to speak. He had aphasia. Is a mess. Monika is a very bright, creative woman who has worked with developmentally disabled kids. And she had used art with them, different arts and expression and creative exercise to actually help develop their skills. And she did this now with her husband, Rob. And he healed remarkably. I mean, it's unbelievable. I know these two people. And Rob is a changed man. He's actually better off than he was before because his previous family were being very abusive of him and using him, and he was letting them do that. He came out of this and stopped doing that and found his voice. Probably can't explain that medically, but there you go. Next one. Fran Droz, a woman I met while I was working with Take Off Pounds Sensibly, a lovely lady. She had advanced pancreatic cancer, was admitted to the big cancer hospital. But she has a very interesting mindset. When they took her into hospital, she said, is there any way I can avoid just having my meals served to me in bed? Can I go down somewhere and eat it? I don't want to stay in bed. And is there any place I can walk around the hospital grounds? She received healing oil from a priest 20-something years ago. She's run a marathon in every US state and Canadian province since, completely healed. How? I don't know. I don't think she knows. Well, she believes. Johan Elgenfritz. He had a cancer diagnosis, guy in the UK. He didn't want to do chemo. He went to a more holistic approach, remarkably recovered, and started something called UK Health Radio to spread the word of effective treatments. And again, amazing. A guy who eschewed conventional treatment. Now, he did follow other approaches and is completely healed and then gone on to use that as his mission. Now, here's a particularly good one. Jeff Frankart is a military physical therapist who worked in the American hospitals in Germany, particularly during the Afghan and Iraq wars. And the problem was that they were getting many soldiers in combat coming in to hospital with neuromuscular injuries. And they said, we've got to try something different, because the conventional approach is, okay, we'll do some surgery, you'll get honorably discharged, and that's it. And a lot of them realized what that meant. Go home where they didn't want to go home because they wanted to be with their buddies on the front line. In fact, one guy was actually put on a plane to fly back to the US. He got off the plane and went AWOL back to the front lines. And these guys knew, well, I don't want to be discharged. If I go home, what am I looking at? Opiates? Suicide? I don't want to do that. And so they said to Jeff, can you come up with a different plan? And so Jeff drew some of his inspiration from animals. You know, if a deer or, you know, an animal is clipped by a car and is sitting on the side of the road, it does not sit there feeling sorry for itself. It does not sit there thinking, oh my God, how am I going to pay these medical bills? It doesn't. It gets up and moves. Jeff designed a program which did not involve any equipment, involved just muscular movements, different muscle exercises, fairly simple to do. Put people in the class, put these guys in a class and said, you can do this. I don't want to hear any complaining. If you complain, you're out. And these guys would go through this. Now, there was some sort of, as you imagine, these are military guys. So Jeff tells one good story about at one time he went out and a lieutenant colonel had gone out and he'd, you know, pushed himself too much. He'd thrown up on the ground. And then a ranger came out and he'd done the same thing. He threw up on the ground. And they were comparing their throw up. And the colonel said, well, you've thrown up more than I have. But they then went back in. Jeff's program has been remarkable. I mean, unbelievable. So much so that the Boston Ballet and numerous other organizations have taken it up. Because what happens when you get hurt or injured? You have thoughts of pain, which of course only make the pain worse. You're told not to move, which is about the worst thing you can be told, right? Two things that actually do not help. Jeff ignored spinal x-rays and did this. And I've spoken to some of these guys. The results are incredible. One guy, his spine is broken. 3 months later, he's back running. 6 months later, he's back jumping out of aircraft. How? Jeff's program. Jeff's program. Activating the whole body. Not telling the mind to be scared. Don't move. Oh, it hurts so much. What have you? The worst thing you can do. And its impact, and the way he conveys this, again, we'll get to that shortly, is critical. Here's this guy. I've actually talked to this guy. Here he is. He's lost an eye and he's lost a leg. Jeff comes to see him. They talk for a bit. The guy's sort of sitting up, and Jeff kicks him in the leg. And the guy screams and yells. And then Jeff said, well, I kicked you where you don't have a leg. You were just expecting the pain. That's why you had it. Phantom pain. Then Jeff said, come on, we're going for a walk. And the guy said, Doc, I've got one eye, one leg, I can't walk. Jeff said, we're going for a walk. Insisted. Eventually, guy got up reluctantly, and Jeff walked him around the ward. The guy sat down. There was a short silence. And then the guy said to Jeff, so when am I going to be able to run again? And he was back running. So this talks about how our beliefs, which are embedded in ourselves, and the emotions they create, what do? Let's look at the impact of medications generally. Now, of course, many medications are really helpful and what have you. But what's the problem with a medication? Well, the problem of medication is, what's the implicit message? I need external help. My body's broken down. I can't do this on my own. Right? What does that make you? Makes you addicted to them. And again, this is not just a thought up here. It is being communicated throughout your body and into your cells. Think about that. Think about the placebo effect. The placebo effect. Is it really a placebo? If you give somebody a medication and they don't think it's going to work, it probably won't work. If you don't give them a medication, but they think it's going to work and they really believe it's going to work, it's going to work. So much more of belief and attitude, so much more. We don't realize it's not just up here. When we've engaged in it, when we accept it, when we believe it, then it enters our body and influences us, influences our thoughts, influences our energy, influences pretty much everything. Dean Ornish, you may know, is a cardiologist, a very, very, very well-known cardiologist, who has written book. He wrote a book. This is the one after that, I think, where he said the best treatment for cardiovascular disease is love. Wow, is love. And then he wrote this book, Love and Survival: The Scientific Basis for the Healing Power of Intimacy. Let's just think about that. Intimacy, love. And so here, if we take this just at the ideological level, and somebody say, I'm a doctor and I'm explaining to the patient, yes, obviously, cuddle up with your dogs. It's really good because, oxytocin is a neurotransmitter and it helps you feel good and what have you. Yeah, why don't you go try it? That's one thing. But if you say the feeling of love and connection activates so many cells in your body that then it reverberates around your body with the potential for change, with the potential for healing. That's a more powerful message than just naming a neurotransmitter. Right? It's not just a neurotransmitter. It's something that is energized and reverberates within you, as we now see is possible through John Lieff's great research and summarization of recent research. This is within us. This is within us. And again, going back to health communication, how do doctors communicate? Well, if you're told, look, I'm afraid you only have 6 months to live, and you believe it, you're probably going to die within 6 months. Right? And this ethic of doing no harm might prevent doing good. I'm sure there would be a lot of doctors who said, well, Howard, this is great, but I couldn't possibly tell it to my clients because if it doesn't work out, they'll sue me because I misled them. And by the way, I've got 5 minutes left, so I got to see 10 more clients. So Jeff Frankart, if he was not bound by the do not harm principle, and he's doing amazing, amazing work. And it's not just what doctors are telling us. Think about this. What do you tell yourself? What do you tell yourself? Because what you tell yourself is going to be a reciprocal relationship there. If you tell yourself negative things, your body will go into a negative state that will reinforce your negative things, and round we go. So how do we decode personas? Let's suppose there is a cellular coding for feeling lethargic and depressed and all of that. Okay, so if you're in that state, how do you decode that? How do you change that cellular coding? Well, for example, if you're lethargic, depressed, the single biggest thing you can do is get up and move. Get up and move. And this goes back a long way, actually, when I was doing my work at the Master's and PhD at the Institute of Psychiatry. There was a psychiatrist there who was running the unit for inpatient depression. He was getting them to move. He was ahead of his time. Move. The cellular coding is don't move, move. Just like in Jeff's case, with all those people in pain, oh, I can't move. No, move. Change the code. The cells will adapt if you believe it and if you do the right things, which is why a lot or several remedies have survived, eons. Meditation, mindfulness, get into that relaxed state, change your mental state, physical activity. Yeah, nutrition. Hey, the food we eat is feeding these cells. Do we want them to function properly? Do we want to kill them? Lifestyle change. Treat your body. It's part of you. It's driving you. It's driving. Don't ignore it. And the sadness today, more than sadness today, is that we have food companies trying to get people addicted to horrible foods. Your body reacts normally to getting horrible foods, which is then treated as, oh, that's a disease. Let's give you meds for the disease. well, let's not go there. That's a long masterclass and seminar. And then the other thing, the key thing, really a key to being exponential, is wisdom. And what is wisdom? Wisdom is knowing your own biases, being open-minded, not buying into binary stuff or all this stuff in the media, being cynical, living in a sense beyond the manipulation and attention grabbing that is out there in the world, which includes all the messages you have received during your lifetime about you, which again have come in and helped code persona. I'm hoping that sometime in the not distant future, maybe with the help of AI, there'll be an app where you say, oh, I believe this. And it'll tell you when you first took on that belief, who told you it, where you were, who others were around. Because we hear things from our childhood, early teenagers, they become encoded in us. We don't even challenge it. And that's really problematic, most of all, when it comes about us, who we are, what are we capable of? Are we capable? I don't know whether you have seen Bo Dermott. She appeared on Britain's Got Talent. And the song she sings is called Defy Gravity. It's an amazing song. And in some ways, that's what I'm talking about in terms of wisdom here. Defy gravity. Defy all the pressures on you to be someone else, to be somebody who you don't want to be, to think one way, to think another one. Defy gravity. Be free. Be free. And it's it's a few years old now, but it's so moving. And again, I believe in moving people, not just talking to them. We can talk all day, but it's how do you convey this to people so people get enthusiastic about it? They begin to believe. If you don't believe it or your belief is minimal, this ain't going to happen to you. But if you believe, you have that power, that miracle within you that we barely understand, but what we do is so amazing. Then there are amazing opportunities for every one of us. A miracle is within. So just a little bit about me. I do have a new website coming up. It's called Being Powered by Howard. It should be up anytime now, but it's going to offer a variety of deals on books. If not, Dr. Howard J. Rankin is my current website, which gives more information about myself. And then, of course, the Exponential Individuals group, which I'd encourage you to explore if you haven't already. Okay, I am going to stop sharing and open the room for any chat comments or direct comments, if we have any.
Thanks so much, Howard. Really appreciate it. And definitely, if anybody has any questions or comments or feedback or reactions to anything that Howard shared, I mean, we could probably do a whole nother masterclass just on that. Howard touched upon so much in this presentation. And even though it might have been to like a sentence or a phrase or a reference there, I mean, it's a whole nother potential discussion point, right? So I just wanted to open up to the group to see who would like to say a few things before we wrap up for today.
No, I just wanted to say thank you. I like the way that you grouped the evidence. I think with a lot of these things, you know, how you've described it, I get it all. but having the evidence there, and it's all, you know, packaged in a way which makes it easy for people to understand and recognize whatever that example was in themselves. So you give them an opportunity to actually put themselves in that shoe and go, oh, maybe that it could be me. Oh yeah, you know, oh, that's what happened. So I thought the presentation was really, really good, and I like the way that you packaged it.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate that coming from you, Julie. Yes, it's complex, so you could go down all sorts of rabbit holes, but I was trying not to do that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there's sort of a snake oil salesman, which that, you know, if we know in this sort of empowering ecosystem that we're in, you know, there's a lot of get do it quick, you know, everything's quick, you know, and what you explained is that actually it's not quick, but if you actually understand systematically how you can do it in a process way, then you'll get there. So I thought it was great. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. To add on to Julie's point, actually, I had some interesting conversations recently with people who've never even thought of this, or they've never considered the subconscious before, and it's kind of overwhelming for them to consider all this. So I guess my question to you is, if you have someone who this is all new to, what is the starting thought? What is the first thought that you would want that person to fully internalize in order to lead to a full understanding of this?
I think part of it is being open-minded. Obviously, it's easy to dismiss anything. So I think it is important. I think it's important. Acceptance is important. And part of that is obviously the way you communicate it to it. I tried to make this more than just, here are a few facts. Oh, cells communicate like this. So, the communication is really, really key. And that's why I use examples, because they were influential in me, but they also were other sources of evidence that this works, And so part of it might be trying to find in them, if somebody were talking to me and they were a little cynical, I would try to find some evidence that either happened to them or somebody very close to them, right? That this could explain what happened to them, right? So perhaps they have a cousin who made a great recovery from something and nobody knows quite why. Try and make it as personal as possible. And for one thing, Jeff Frankart's work really resonated with me, just what he was telling me and speaking to those guys. But I had a similar experience a long time ago, probably 20 years ago. I had a really bad back problem. It was horrendous. In fact, it was so bad, I was on opiates, I was on all this stuff. In my office, when there wasn't anyone there, I was lying down or standing up because I couldn't sit without it. And it was horrendous. This went on for a few months. And it was frustrating me because I was a jogger and I couldn't go anywhere. And so one day I decided, no, I'm just going to go for a walk. And I went for a walk and it wasn't any worse. So, okay. And the next day I walked a bit further. Within 30 days, the whole thing had gone through walking and just going further and further. Right? Our body's amazing and it will do everything it can to heal us if we do the right things. But if we tell ourselves, oh, I can't move, oh, this pain is horrible, or what have you, all you're doing is accentuating that rather than decoding it. And that's what Jeff's guys were able to do. He was able to decode that. It does not mean you can't move. It does not mean you're in constant pain. It does not mean that. And so how can you convey that to whoever you're talking to? How can you say, well, tell me something that really changed you? And it doesn't have to be a physical thing. What changed you? somebody might say, oh yeah, I remember one time, and oh, I never thought the same way again, or it really helped me understand this. What are those points of change, and can you use that to enhance their belief or their understanding of something? And again, this goes back to knowing how to communicate. Because, as I say, a lot of communication in this field can be very bland, and it could be a gem if people really understand it. But if, somebody say, well, yeah, I heard this thing the other day by this guy, and he was saying, you can move and, don't ignore your pain, don't overemphasize your pain. And I don't know, maybe it'll work. Or you could give them a convincing story, right? Because they got to embrace it. If it's just up here, it ain't going to happen. All of these stories are about people who really believed they were not going to die in some of these cases, or they were not going to, go down the rabbit hole. No, I'm not doing that. I'm going to find something that I can pursue. And as I say, I've spoken to more people than I've presented here have done that. And it's amazing. And you all probably know somebody like that, who just wouldn't accept something, said, no, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. And it filled them with energy, which I think is really important, and typically positive energy that then enables you to do and pursue these things, right? If you don't have any energy, you're just going to sit on the sofa all day sleeping. So for me, what was really crucial in any conversation where you're trying to convey potentially anything that's changing, whether that's mind changing, body changing, soul changing, personality changing, it's got to be communicated in the right way. So I know that's very general, but about the best I can do, David.
Really good stuff. I guess as we're winding down here, a lot of us believe that you can heal yourself. I think we heard lots of examples of that on this call. I think some of you probably have your own stories as well. A book that recently got my attention, I put in the chat, is called Supercharged Self-Healing by R.J. Spina. And he talks a lot about this, as I'm sure lots of other authors and people do, right? The body, the mind, the heart, the gut, all its connections, the whole entire human system is quite amazing. And yeah,
and we've got to look at the totality of it, as I said at the beginning, not just, there's our mind and what we think about. That's a small part of the picture, and then we talk about the brain-body system, how amazing that is. And please feel free to read John Lieff's book. I don't get any commission. You don't have to pay me. It's such an amazing book. It really is. You'll get it. You'll understand what I'm talking about. And when you see that, it's transformational, I think. But again, it's not just about physical healing. It's about what goes on up here. Like the guy I mentioned in the stroke, Rob, his wife, Monika, brought him through that. He came out of that a different person. Partly, I think, because he'd been through the experience and said, I'm not putting up with this BS anymore. He had the strength to do that. And having gone through potentially fatal experience, you probably are a bit more focused on what's important to you, right? But again, I think we know so little. We like to think we know a lot, but actually I think we know relatively little. And it would be amazing, fast forward 300 years if we're still there, and how things have changed. But definitely, it lies within us to heal ourselves. Absolutely no question about that. Even if you're going with conventional medicine, it's fine. You still need the energy, the belief, right? To follow the instructions, to be active, to be positive. You need that positive energy, because maybe that, more than anything else, is what's going to heal you.
So true, so true. So as we're winding down, any other last minute thoughts or comments for Howard?
Yeah, one last comment here, Howard, was impressive the way you put it together, all this very good track of information and examples. That is a very strong way to communicate facts and evidences that things happened. So it's not a possibility, they're facts. And what came to me was that Dr. Hannon would develop homeopathy, that our body has everything that it needs to cure or to get us back to balance, and created the concept of homeostasis. So you will be back to balance as you wish. And we are the only being in this planet that has the power of willing something, to imagine, to create new things. So going a little bit to the religious side, said we were created like God. So we are the only being that are said to be like this. So if he's the creator, we can create too. And we are the ones that can create with the mind. So if you can imagine, if you can put yourself in a better perspective, creating visuals or like attitudes or habits or just motion, as you mentioned, that will bring back to you what your body has internally ready to create you. So it depends on you. The state you are today was developed by something you did back then. You just didn't know that right. Your most powerful tool, which is your brain and your mind, was being used by the system around you, and that you're coded, as you mentioned, very early on your life, to think like that, to accept things that's true, but do not, and that those truths will just led you to the place you were today. So it's what you brought to us today was a very strong shake saying, wake up, you can make it. You made everything that is here for you today. And that can be changed from self-knowledge to self-awareness to self-wisdom, and then moving forward, maybe we can have a better betterment, a collective betterment, as we say in ExI. So thank you very much for the session today. Well, it was inspiring.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right, folks. Well, I think we're good for today. Again, I'd like to thank Dr. Howard Rankin for his presentation today. And this is part of a longer series that we've been doing at ExI, the masterclasses. If you missed any of them, exponentialindividuals.io/media. They're all there, plus a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So definitely check that out. Looking forward to seeing you at a future masterclass, and hopefully getting some feedback from you on our book that Howard talked about, the Exponentially Individual Playbook. So on behalf of everyone at ExI, I just want to say thank you again, Howard, for today, and we will talk to you soon on another channel. Thanks, everyone.